Welcome to Travel, Pray, Slay, a podcast for professional women who travel, love God, and are ready to level up their life. On the podcast, we discuss all things travel, faith, career, love, and lifestyle, all focused on helping you take the next steps you need to bring your visions into reality and live the extraordinary life God created for you to live. If you love Jesus, Beyonce, and catching flights, then look no further because you have found your tribe, sis. I'm your host, Toya Nicole, and I can't wait to get into today's episode with you. Hey, y'all. I am back for another episode. So I can't believe it's already the holidays. So I hope you all are able to connect with family and staying safe and getting your boosters if that's what you need and making lots of exciting plans for the holidays. So I just wanted to come in and do another podcast of a trip recap. So last month I went to Washington, D.C. area with a few girlfriends, and it was a pretty long weekend trip. So I left out on a Thursday and then I came back on Monday. So good amount of time there and was all over the DMV area. So DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So I thought it would be a good time to recap for you all how the trip went and give you a few tips and tricks if you are planning to go to the Washington, D.C. area, if you have not yet made it to our nation's capital. So first of all, the trip came about because I caught a great deal on Southwest Airlines. They were having their fall sale and it was $97 round trip. So opened the group chat, hit up my girls, and I was like, yo, DC? And they were like, yeah, let's book it. And so I have a couple of friends in the area. I have been to DC a couple of times. I went to both Obama inaugurations. I've, been to DC just to hang out before. But the last time I was in DC was about 5 years ago. So it had been a while. And I really wanted to see a couple of things in DC, actually revisit some of my favorite restaurants, but mainly visit the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. So that was the whole point. The museum opened in 2016, and that was the last time I was there. And at that time, it was very difficult to get in. So saw the cheap flight. I actually had some miles on Southwest, so was able to redeem my miles and actually only paid for one part of the trip. Got that great deal. So there are 3 airports that you can fly into to get to Washington, D.C. So again, the DMV area, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia is a metroplex, if you will. And so there are 3 airports. So there is the Ronald Reagan Airport, which is in Virginia. That is actually the closest one to the D.C. metro area. And as far as public transportation goes, you can actually take the metro, which is the equivalent to their subway or, their L if you're from Chicago, but it's basically the train. You can take that direct from Ronald Reagan Airport into the city. So it's actually going to be the airport that is your closest option. So Ronald Reagan Airport gets you the closest to DC. The other airport is Dulles Airport. That one is also in Virginia, but it's a little further out. So, and it's not accessible to the DC area via public transportation. So I would say that most people fly into Dulles if they truly are going to visit someone and be in the Virginia area. They're not planning to spend a lot of time in DC, or if you are going to fly into Dulles, just be prepared to definitely do a ride share or some type of car service to get you from Dulles Airport into the DC area. Then the third airport is Baltimore Airport, also named the Baltimore Thurgood Marshall International Airport. So shout out to him. It's named after Thurgood Marshall. And this is the airport that we flew into. Southwest did have options for, I think Ronald Reagan is the other airport that Southwest flies into. When I went a couple years ago, I actually flew into the Ronald Reagan Airport, and we did take the metro into the city. But this time we flew into Baltimore. This was my first time flying into the Baltimore airport. It is the furthest from DC. It's a little over 30 miles. It's in Maryland. Obviously, that's where Baltimore is. And to get to the DC area, you can take their Mlk, which is basically like the Amtrak. So it's a commuter rail line, and it will take you directly into Union Station, which is pretty much, within 1 or 2 miles of the Capitol building. So it's very much in central DC. So we decided to take the Amtrak leaving DC, and it was only $8 for the train ride. And it departed from Union Station. There was a train departing, seemingly about every 45 minutes to an hour. And it only took us 30 minutes. It was a quiet, clean, nice ride. And if you were driving and if you were riding, in an Uber or a Lyft, you would have been sitting in traffic up to 1.5 to 2 hours. And an Uber ride is anywhere from $50 to $60. So keep that in mind. I would say the flights tend to be cheaper to Baltimore because they know it's the furthest away. But Baltimore is a great city. There's a lot of culture and things to check out there. We did not have a chance to do that on this trip, but the next trip, I definitely am contemplating flying into Baltimore again and actually staying in Baltimore around the Inner Harbor area and discovering more about Baltimore, and then just opting to take the Amtrak into Union Station for when I want to hang out in DC. So again, Baltimore Airport is the furthest, but you can take the train into the city, and Ronald Reagan is going to get you the closest to DC, and you'll be able to take the metro, which again, fares for the metro are like $4 to $5. So now that you're there, kind of think about where to stay, right? So again, we wanted to stay in the DC area. So we knew, we were going to have some costs associated with flying into Baltimore. So a friend of mine picked me up who lives in Virginia. Shout out to Brittany of Shop Wonderful. I've had her on the podcast before. She lives in the suburban Virginia area. So she picked me up. But my other girlfriends that arrived, one took an Uber in to DC and the other took the train. So we all explored the 3 different ways. We stayed in an Airbnb in a quiet tree-lined street in central DC. It was a great location, beautiful walk-up brownstone. So you all know I've talked before about Airbnbs versus hotels. I love a good Airbnb, and it's so cozy and it has a very authentic experience. So because it was 3 of us, and again, don't want to try to get 2 or 3 separate hotel rooms, kind of want to still be able to be together, but have an experience. So this was like a 2-bedroom Airbnb. Was plenty of space. The TV had Netflix. There was a full kitchen. So it was a really great experience. We were able to walk around to most locations and then take Ubers to some of the locations that were pretty much like a little over a mile. So we walked to Brunch one day, which was only like a little mile away. It was nice fall weather. And then we walked to coffee shops. When we did do the museums and whatnot, we did take Ubers. I would say the max we ever paid for Uber getting in and around the U Street area to the National Mall where all the monuments and museums were, we never paid more than $15 for an Uber. So just keep that in mind. DC is a very walkable city. We never took the metro, but I have taken the metro in DC before. And you are also able to connect to the other parts of the DMV area rather from DC. So if you do decide to stay in DC, but still want to go to Baltimore, just know that, yes, you can take the train out there. I would allow for some time though. Like if you plan to go to Baltimore, I would make that like a day trip. If you plan to go to Virginia, it's a little bit easier to get to areas like Alexandria, Virginia. And then same thing, if you want to stay in Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia, Arlington, Virginia are pretty much like the Virginia area cities that are going to be closest to DC and pretty much accessible by the metro. But again, I like staying in DC, but you can consider all of that, right? Consider the price point, consider the accommodations you want to have, and consider the things you want to do. If you know you're strictly going to be there for visiting the National Mall and going down to the U Street area, pretty much staying in central DC, it's worth it to go ahead and stay in DC so that you cut down on the time that you would spend waiting on trains, waiting on Ubers, etc. So you have a lot of options. There are a lot of hotels, but I found when we were trying to find the right Airbnb that there were a ton of Airbnbs. DC is a very densely populated residential town. So tons of folks offering up their places for Airbnbs. So look into that. Okay, y'all, I'm just interrupting this episode briefly to remind you about the Travel, Pray, Slay merch. Did you know we had an online shop? Well, if you want to make a statement and slay, then you have to head over to travelprayslay.com/shop and check out all our merchandise. We've got hoodies, t-shirts, mugs, accessory bags, and luggage tags, which are my favorite. We've got everything in the online shop you need for your next trip. And whether that's a trip to Paris or just your daily trip to Target, you still want to make sure that you slay, sis. So head over to travelprayslay.com/shop and pick up some merch today. And then decide what you want to do. So as I said, the purpose of our trip was to visit the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. And it was so worth it. So it's a beautiful, 6-story building. It took us 2 days to get through it all. And to be honest, could have took another day to kind of go over more floors and details. But a couple of things you want to keep in mind when you're planning to visit the Smithsonian's. Well, for one, they're all free. So that's great. In the past, on trips to DC, I have visited the other Smithsonian Museum, but the African American History and Culture Museum was just built in 2016. All the Smithsonians are free, but with the African American History and Culture Museum, just because it's so popular and to be able to have some crowd control, you do have to reserve your ticket. So all we had to do was 30 days out from the day that we were planning to go, I hopped online at 8 a.m. and they open up the reservation system. You pick a time slot, you pick how many tickets you want, and you're good to go. So that was great because prior to attending, we knew what day and what time we needed to be there. And to be honest, we were about 20 minutes late and they didn't trip about it. Now, if you are already in the area and you decide at the last minute, oh, I want to go tomorrow, they do offer same day passes. So same thing. If you want to go on that Monday, you get up at 8:15 DC time and you see what time slots they have available and you can book it. So that's what happened. We had our ticket booked for Saturday. We stayed until they kicked us out. And we were like, we still did not get through the top floors and we want to come back tomorrow. And so the guy was like, just get on in the morning. So I set my alarm Sunday morning and I was able to, book us for 2:00 that day so that we could go back. So that was great. I mean, it was just beautiful. You start with where our ancestry started, right? In Africa, and it walks you through all of that, the transatlantic slave trade, and then it walks you into slavery in the US, and it is just breathtakingly beautiful. I learned even more about my culture and history, and it's just beautifully displayed. There are a lot of artifacts and just memorabilia. When you get into some of the more modern pop culture times, they've got like Michael Jackson's like jacket from when he performed like Billie Jean. They've got, Duke Ellington's suit. They've got Chuck Berry's Cadillac. So they've got like Oscars that were presented to African Americans. So they have the dress that Oprah wore in The Color Purple as Miss Sophia on display. So really great. And then if you visited there, you would be in what's considered the National Mall area. So the MLK Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, the National Monument, the White House, all of those things are going to be right in that same area. Those are all of the places that I love to visit, places I have been before. The MLK Memorial is beautiful. The Lincoln Memorial is just outstanding. So always go and visit those places. And then as far as neighborhoods go, the U Street area. So U Street has historically been the heart of Black culture. There's the African American Civil War and memorial there. And it's just one long street. I feel like it's about at least a good 8 blocks of Black owned restaurants, shops. And it's really like the cultural district for DC. Howard University is nearby. So a couple of popular Black owned restaurants or Black focused restaurants as well too, like Busboy and Poets, Ben's Chili Bowl, which is famous for like the half smoked sausage covered in chili. The Obamas ate there. I know when I went to the first inauguration, there was like a line wrapped around the corner and I waited in it because everybody wanted to get the half smoked Ben's Chili Bowl that, Obama would eat there and love. We went to a couple of places on the U Street area. So we did brunch at Busboy and Poets, which is a cool concept. It is a bookstore and a restaurant, and it is named after Langston Hughes, who was a famous Black poet, but was also a busboy at one point. So it's a really cool place. They have several across the DC area. They do, spoken word, live events there, and they've got some really great food, and it's a nice cultural vibe. We also went to hear some live music at JoJo's Bar and Restaurant. So that was great. Another area is Adams Morgan. So think kind of more like college town, but it was a great area. I remember it was like one of the first neighborhoods I fell in love with when I went to DC the first time, which was around college. So we did go there this time. We went to a comedy show and a jazz club that was in the area. Just think of a place that is like, going all the way until 3, 4 in the morning. Again, that's why I think like, college age, a lot of the people that we saw seemed to be like in their 20s, some maybe late 20s, but we were out late. They had the jumbo slice places, jumbo pizza slice places open late. So we grabbed a greasy slice of pizza. So, the Adams Morgan district is going to have a lot of comedy clubs, bars, and dives and things like that. Georgetown is a classic DC area, bougie restaurants and boutique shops and cupcake places and all that. Didn't go to Georgetown this time, but definitely went to Georgetown on my last trip. And then one of the other places that we visited was Black Lives Matter Plaza, which is on K Street, right down the street from the White House. So, as you all know, in the wake of everything with George Floyd and the uprising in the summer of 2020, which is hard to believe that was going on almost 2 years ago, a lot of cities across the country, the first being DC, did like a mural. It's basically a long street with Black Lives Matter painted. And it's right outside the White House. And that was pretty cool to see. It's kind of like in the middle of a thoroughfare and you can walk up and down the plaza. We took some pictures. That was great to see and have it represented. And, these big yellow bold letters right in the middle of our nation's capital, right outside the White House, is just very cool to see. And so we did that. We had dinner at one of my favorite restaurants, which is RPM Italian. I used to go there a lot when I was in Chicago. And it was just an overall good time. So again, DC is one of my favorite cities. If you really want to get into some history, I'm kind of a history nerd, and really get into some culture. DC has just a great Black culture. I mean, one night we were just walking down U Street to the next place, and there was like a band on the corner, just like playing like go-go music, and everybody was dancing. A lot of great food, a lot of great music, and just an overall good time. So I hope you keep those tips in mind next time you go to the DC area. Where to fly into, know your options, look for all the best flight deals, look at all the best Airbnbs, because there are a lot of options for Airbnbs in a very residential area like DC. And be sure to check out all the Smithsonian museums. For the busy museums like the African American History and Culture Museum, be sure you book in advance to secure your spot. And again, allow for 2 days, if not 3, to go through the entire museum because it is massive, and check out some of the cool spots. Don't forget to try to take a day trip over to Baltimore, as well as check out Alexandria, Virginia. There is Old Town Alexandria, which is a pretty cool place. So that's how my trip went. Wanted to give you all an update and wanted to share with you all some of the tips and tricks in navigating a trip to the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. So I will talk to you all soon. Bye. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to check out the show notes, you can head over to the website, travelprayslay.com. I would love to connect on social media, so be sure you are following me on Instagram at travelprayandslay and Facebook at travelprayslay. Again, Instagram is at travelprayandslay. And if you love this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And be sure to leave a review. Thanks for listening, and you'll hear from me soon.